A few of you have been telling me to check out the Metal Apocalypse Infection AU created by Feeling Animoya over here on Instagram. And I also noticed that there's a comic that's being dubbed over here on YouTube by Porcelain Doll Studio. And I have to say that this AU overall is amazing so far. From what I've read right now, it seems to take place in a alternate universe where Sonic and the gang are not able to stop the metal virus and it ends up taking over the planet. And as a quick recap, the metal virus is a part of the official Sonic canon, and it deals with an incident where Eggman used nanobots to create a virus that turned any living thing into metal, and it basically took Sonic's whole team plus Eggman to defeat the virus once it got out of control. Now, over in the first chapter of the comic, we see Amy Rose bring some food to Tails, who seems to be sitting in his lab looking over a tracker. And based on the fact that he still has a full bowl of food here, we can assume that he hasn't been eating. And then we hear this outburst that gives us some insight into why.
Let me watch the tracker. Stop. Take a break. No! He's my brother. Only I can!
It seems like the person that Tails is trying to track right now is likely Sonic, and we can assume that he's infected, especially since if this is based on the lore of the official metal virus, Sonic was infected fairly early on, and only his extreme speed and stamina kept the virus from spreading. But of course, that couldn't last forever because even Sonic has to rest. We also get confirmation at the end of the episode that Sonic is indeed infected.
We need you. He needs you.
Now, first thing that I want to note, the voice acting here is fire. It is so well done. Second thing I want to note is that even though Sonic seems to be infected, I find it interesting that he's still able to actually speak, which is something that usually is lost once people are infected with the metal virus. So I'm hopeful that Sonic may still have his mind, or at least to some degree, and maybe that means that they can still save him. Now, over on Instagram, we get to see the character's actual stat sheets, and starting with Tails, we can see that he is still clean of the infection, but his sanity is down really far. A lot of that is due to the stress of trying to find Sonic and the lack of sleep. But one good thing that I spotted here is that Eggman is still alive and helping Tails. And honestly, with the two of them on the same team, I'm very confident that they're going to be able to find a cure, even though Eggman is kind of crazy and reckless. Next, we get to see Amy's stat sheet, and she is also clean of the infection and is the co-leader of this group right now alongside with Knuckles. And all of her stats are actually still pretty good, which I was kind of surprised to see because Amy is usually one of the first people to get infected in these Sonic infection AUs. One more thing to point out is that the boots that they're wearing here are not just for style, but rather they allow these guys to be able to walk on the metal surfaces without contracting the virus. After that, we get to take a look at Sonic, and my man looks absolutely monstrous. His health and sanity are pretty much gone, and he keeps repeating the name Tails over and over again. And at first, I was hopeful that maybe this meant that he kept some of his mind, but it looks like that's not the case. To make matters worse, it looks like his body is starting to destabilize and hollow out, meaning that Tails and the crew will have to save him soon, or his body will be completely broken down, or aka, he'll be knocking on heaven's door. Another thing that makes me really sad about Sonic's situation is that when you look at this panel here, it seems that he ran away from the group so that he will be far enough away to where his infected body couldn't harm them. So this may make it even harder for the team to actually find him and be able to cure him. The next sheet reveals the 5 stages of the infection, and unfortunately, the victim here is Tangle. We see at stage 0, she came into contact with the metal, getting a bunch of it on her tail. And once the virus is on the person, it only takes about 5 to 10 minutes to fully spread. And if the contaminated person touches anyone else, they will also infect them. At stage 1, the infected person no longer knows who they are and will lash out at anyone they see. The only good news is that once they're infected, they actually are really slow, so it's easy to avoid them. Stage 2 is where the real trouble begins because this is where the body of the victim starts to get longer and also develops these spikes and barbs. The aggression and physical strength of the infected person also goes way up, although it still seems like they may be slow at this point. Stage 3 is where the infected person starts to no longer resemble themselves and their bodies begin to break down. But even though they look frail and broken at this point, they're actually extremely strong in this stage and can one-tap weaker characters. At stage 4, we see that the character starts to corrode or aka melt away, and at this point, they can no longer be cured. And while they are even slower than before at this stage, they are even more powerful, so running is the only viable option. I also want to point out the note here that says this isn't your friend anymore. And I feel terrible for Whisper because we know just how deeply she cares about Tangle. In the original Metavirus comic, when Whisper found out that Eggman was responsible for the virus, she almost sniped his head off, with Cream being the only reason that she didn't. And finally, we have stage 5, and this is where the infected creature seems to fuse with its surrounding, very similar to The Last of Us 2, when infected would fuse into the walls. And if that's where it ended, that wouldn't be too bad, but at this stage, the infected also let out toxic gas, and we can assume that it either takes people out or infects them with the virus as well. Now that we understand the infected stages, I want to go ahead and talk about Shadow, because even though he is clearly infected, sitting at stage 1, he hasn't gone past that stage, even though he's been infected for about half a year. The other thing that I found interesting is that he's been avoiding all the other infected characters, especially Sonic, almost as if he still has the ability to think in subcapacity. I believe that Shadow may have some resistance to the virus because he's supposed to be immune to all viruses and diseases, but since this is like a man-made virus using nanobots, his body isn't able to resist it fully. Now, back over in the comic, we see that Amy has been feeling that Knuckles has been hiding something for her, so she decided to ask around and see what she can find. But when she speaks to Rouge and Whisper, they're not really much help. And of course, Eggman wasn't going to cooperate at all. She also tries to speak with Silver, but he's super stressed out trying to keep everyone safe, so Amy has to go to her trump card, which is Espio, and he decides to do some spying on her behalf. He basically follows Knuckles and Whisper out into the woods, and we get to see this scene.
I hope it's nothing. I'm just delusional.
Charmy?
And based on that scene, it seems like Knuckles and Whisper just incinerated Charmy. And while we haven't seen their stat sheet yet, I can assume they ended up getting infected. After that, we get to see Knuckles' stat sheet, and we see that while he is unaffected, his sanity is fairly low. We also see that he's responsible for doing these excursions, which we can assume just means that he leads the team when they go out to search for or take out infected. And more importantly, we see that half of these missions are off the books, which likely explains why SBO was so surprised to see Charmy get torched. This also explains why Knuckles says, "I did what I had to do." While I am happy to see Knuckles playing a bigger role in this AU, I hate that he seems to have to take a lot of the dirty work on his own shoulders. We can see how it has affected his mind, and if we look here, we also see that he's lost an arm already. We also have the stat sheet for Whisper here, and the first thing that stood out with me is that she is really close to losing her mind. Now that she's lost Tangle, she doesn't speak, and she only really listens to Knuckles, and she sees all the infected as targets. And while she is a powerful ally, I have a feeling that she will become a liability at some point. After that, we see Metal, and I'm actually really happy to see that he's still around, because with both Sonic and Shadow infected, the team really needs a bit of replacement muscle. And since he is obviously immune to the virus, he may be one of the more valuable characters in this AU right now. We also see him holding this doll here, and apparently the team has set up these dolls around the area so that they act as surveillance cameras. And this is basically how the team is able to track infected and take them out so quickly. Next, we get to see Silver, and he is running himself ragged. Since he's immune, he has taken it on himself to almost always be out in the field fighting infected. And while he takes SBO and Metal with him sometimes, he is still taking some deep wounds. The most notable one being the gash in his chest that almost ended his life, and also the loss of his eye here. While his power and smart stats are still really high, we can see that he isn't doing very well mentally and is even worse off physically. After that, we get to see the Chaotix team sheets, starting with Espio, who we already seen is clean of the infection. He seems to be acting as the caregiver of the team now, making sure everybody has enough food, and he's also the scout, which makes sense considering that he has the ability to turn invisible. He has a bracelet on his wrist here to remember both Charmy and Vector. And it seems like the loss of his friends has taken a toll on his sanity, which is why he has gone from 4 to 2. We finally get to see what happened to Charmy as well, and while we knew that he was infected, we didn't know that he was already at stage 4. We learned that Espio is lucky that Knuckles found him first because Charmy has the ability to see Espio even when he's invisible, likely because of how much they have worked together in the past. And if all that wasn't bad enough, infected Charmy also still had the ability to fly, so Knuckles really had no choice but to put the little guy down. And then we get to see Vector, who is at the 3rd stage of the infection, and he has been described as the most dangerous Zombot ever, and this is likely due to the fact that Vector was already super strong before he got infected. Now though, he can destroy pretty much anything he can get his claws or jaws on. This is also why his power stat is off the charts here. Next, we get to see Rouge, and I'm happy to see that she's still cleaning the virus, especially considering that she is 5 months pregnant. And for what I understand, Knuckles is the father, although he doesn't know that she's pregnant. He just thinks that she's been sick lately. The only people that seem to know right now are SBO, Amy, and Omega. And I find it kind of cute that Omega refuses to leave her side now, wanting to protect her. Although, since he is just a head, that's going to be pretty difficult if things really hit the fan. And for people who may be wondering how he ended up like this, I believe this is a reference to what happened to him in the official Metal Virus comic. The infected Mobians basically ripped him apart because Omega refused to retreat. I think we can all agree that Omega definitely has his flaws, but one thing that you cannot say is that he ever backed down from a fight.
I don't want peace. I want problems, always.
Now back over in the comic, we see that Blaze has been brought to Sonic's dimension by the Soul Emeralds, although she doesn't seem to know how bad things are here at the moment. And as she's walking around this metallic forest, she sees a little metal flower and decides to pick it up, only to notice an infected looming above her. Although she really should have been looking behind her, because this monstrosity seems to have been stalking her through the woods. And while we don't know who this is for sure, we can assume that this is Vector because he is still at stage 3 and able to move around freely. When we get to take a look at Blaze's stat sheet, we see that she is now considered to be missing. But the good news here is that Tails' tracker was able to alert the team that Blaze arrived in their dimension, which may mean that they can actually save her before she's eaten or ripped apart. I also want to point out though that Blaze is very powerful in her own right, so there is a very good chance that she may be able to hold her own, but we'll have to wait and see. After that, we finally get to see Eggman's stat sheet, and the first thing that I noticed is that my man has lost a ton of weight. Apparently, he hasn't been eating as well as he used to, considering that food is way harder to find in this new world. And while he has been helping Tails and the crew, he also understands that everyone hates him because he is the person who created this virus in the first place. But the heroes have to keep him around because he has too much knowledge that they can't afford to waste. And while his power is really low, all his other stats are really good. The last thing I want to point out here is that Metal has become closer with Tails than with Eggman since the outbreak, which of course has made Eggman angry. But based on this comic page here, I think it makes sense. It seems that Tails is the person that actually repaired Metal and even gave him a voice box, treating him far more kindly than Eggman ever did. And for my people who are curious about what happened to Starline, my boy is literally a puddle. And we actually have a comic to show what happened to him. Back when the virus was first created, Starline understood that Eggman didn't really have control of it, so he made a plan to actually put a stop to it before it got too far out of hand. He was going to release some creatures a part of a group called the Deadly Six, and the reason he wanted to work with them was because they have the ability to control metal. But before he could actually put his plan into motion, Eggman sent his 2 robots over to escort Starline out, saying that he was no longer useful. But this is where we see just how crazy Eggman is, because he didn't mean escort him out of the building, but rather escort him out of this life. And we see this when the robots throw Starline into a big batch of the virus, which explains why he is completely melted away. I know that he's not necessarily like a good character, but he was trying to do the right thing here. Next we see Cream, and I'm happy to see that she is still safe, especially because we know these AUs do not spare the children. I mean, just in this one, we already seen what happened with Charmy. And even though she's locked up most of the time, at least she still has Jim to keep her company. It looks like he promised Vanilla that he would look after Cream after she ended up getting infected. And then we actually get to see Vanilla, who is already at the 4th stage. Something that I find interesting though is that she is abnormal just like Shadow. Even though she is at the 4th stage, she is not aggressive at all, but rather just follows survivors around and watches their movements. The only time people actually get hurt by her is when they accidentally walk into her, because even though she is 10 feet tall, she's surprisingly stealthy. In the next comic, we get to see Shadow again, and he is still wandering around aimlessly, but then he spots Mighty. But instead of seeing the armadillo, he sees a young lady. More specifically, he sees Maria. And for those of you that may be confused by this, Maria, or aka Maria Robotnik, was one of Shadow's best friends. And she was actually very sick as well, and she ended up passing away. But she was very important to Shadow, and probably the main reason that Shadow ended up becoming like a heroic character. He basically made a promise to her that he would do his best to protect the world. And this explains why Shadow is not attacking anyone. Every survivor that he sees reminds him of Maria, and he would never hurt Maria, so he just flies or runs away. And this also helps us understand why he was screaming Maria's name here in the comic. I'm really hoping that this means that Shadow will be able to actually help the survivors at some point, because having an infected fighting on their side would be a big help. After that comic, we finally get to see Mighty and his crew's stat sheets. Since Tails is the person writing up these reports, he has Mighty labeled as missing at the moment, but at least we know that he's still alive, even though he is pretty beat up. I am a bit worried about the fact that he isn't seeing with Ray here. And based on his stat sheet, it looked like Ray had his wing ripped, which really increases the chances of him being caught by an infected character. We also have this original character that is traveling with the pair, and she seems to be some kind of soldier. And just like the other two, she seems to be pretty beat up as well. In the next comic, we see that the team has set off to find Blaze, and as Amy and Meadow are moving through the forest, they start to see evidence of a fight. The main clue being this flower with blood on it. And after a bit more searching, they finally find Blaze, but she is now missing one of her arms, her leg, and maybe even an eye here. And while Amy thinks that Blaze has passed away, Meadow is able to detect a pulse, although it is faint. And knowing that she is alive, the pair hurry back to the base to get her some medical attention ASAP. Now, even though Blaze got pretty beat up, she didn't go down without a fight. She literally melted away the left side of Vector and forced him to run away before he could finish her off. While he still is very dangerous, he's way weaker than he was before. In the next panel, we get to see fully what actually became of Blaze after her fight, and luckily the Soul Emeralds were able to not only keep her alive, but also help regenerate some of her internal organs. This panel also reveals that 9 months have passed, and as far as we know, there is still no cure. One good thing that did come out of Blaze being attacked is that Silver has become a lot less reckless. Instead of always being out in the field trying to find infected to fight, he spends more time in the base looking over Blaze. We actually have a comic here that goes into a bit more detail as well. As you see here, Silver feels like it's his job to protect the future and his friends. And this is why he was so distraught when he found out about Blaze. And even though people are trying to get him to stay calm, he ends up screaming, saying that he's going to take out whoever did this to her. Luckily, SBO is there to calm him down, and then we're left with this panel of Silver holding Blaze's hand, asking why he couldn't protect her. Which honestly kind of breaks my heart, because I always forget just how young Silver really is. After that, we get to see a voice message from Infinite going out to the survivors.
You call them heroes, Sonic's friends. Loyal, brave, righteous. But when the metal virus devours your homes, your families, where are they? Standing guard over him. Ivo Robotnik, the rod at the core of this apocalypse. He unleashed this plague of chrome and ruin, and they protect him. They speak of mercy, of second chances, as their world is stripped to a lifeless metal. There is no valor in shielding a monster, no justice in letting the architect of extinction breathe while everything else turns to rust. These are not heroes. They are cowards in capes, fools draped in old ideals, choking on the past while the future corrodes. Remember that when you're nothing but a statue of steel, screaming in silence, you won't be saved by the ones who let this happen.
So in my opinion, his whole speech is basically meant to turn the rest of the survivors against Tails and the rest of the heroes. And I believe that he's trying to position himself and his crew to be like the new heroes of this world. And honestly, his speech was very good and kind of compelling. Especially the line where he says that there is no valor in shielding a monster, no justice in letting the architect of extinction breathe while everyone else turns to rust. And while I do think that Eggman is more valuable alive, I also understand that a lot of time has passed and neither of them, Tails or Eggman, have come up with any real solutions. So I wouldn't be surprised if the surviving Mobians turned their backs on the heroes, simply because Infinite is kind of giving them hope, even if it's false hope. After Infinite's speech, we get a look at his stat sheet and we learn that he's actually the leader of a group called Paradise. And just as he alludes to in his speech, he's basically telling people that he can protect them, bringing them safety and security, but I don't actually believe that he can protect anybody from this virus. I think it's much more likely that he's just trying to make Tails and the other heroes look bad. The last thing that I want to point out is that he seems to be hell-bent on catching Shadow. And while we don't know why, I assume he wants to use him to find a cure since Shadow isn't acting like the other infected. Other members of this Paradise group include Mimic, who is an interesting character because they are able to copy the physical appearance of any other character. He's also considered to be Infinite's right-hand man and manages most of Paradise's facilities. After that, we see this character named Ash, and what I find interesting is that they were seen earlier with Mighty. I think that she's infiltrated this Paradise group and is acting as like a foot soldier that she can get more information about them. The next character that we see is named Belle, and she is the person that actually is writing these stat sheets for Paradise. And if she looks familiar to you, it's because she is the wooden doll that Mr. Tinker, or aka the good Eggman, created when he lost his memories for a time. It seems like after the outbreak, she ended up with this Paradise group by accident, and now they kind of put her to work as a maintenance worker. But she doesn't actually have any allegiance to these people and is simply trying to get in touch with the heroes and, more importantly, her dad, or aka Eggman. The sad part here, though, is that I don't think she knows that Eggman has gotten all his memories back yet and is no longer the kind father that she once knew. We finally get some more information about Mighty and Ray, and it turns out that they are also here in Paradise, but not by choice, it would seem. It looks like Infinite and his crew rescued the pair at one point, but they haven't been treating them well. Mighty has basically become Infinite's personal enforcer, getting rid of anybody who disobeys him. And if Mighty doesn't listen, they will punish Ray. The only good news is that it looks like Ray and Belle have kind of linked up and become friends, so they're able to keep each other strong. And they also have a couple of these little wisps that keep them company as well. I really feel bad for these two, especially because when you think about it, Belle is only like 1 to 2 years old at this point, and Ray is only 13. In the next comment, we get to see SBO's perspective, starting from the day that he actually followed Knuckles and Whisper out into the forest. The first thing we see is Knuckles giving orders to Jet to scout around the sanctuary. And I'm happy to see that at least one member of the Babylon Rogues are still alive, because let's be honest, these guys really came in clutch in the original Metal Virus series. The comic also shows Rouge, and I don't know how Knuckles doesn't see that she's pregnant. It actually looks like my girl is smuggling a watermelon under that coat. Luckily though, Knuckles is at least aware enough that Rouge is sick and hasn't been moving like her normal self, so he forces her to stay in the base, stating that he can't lose her too. And after that scene, we get to see the stat sheet for Jet, and I was actually really surprised to see that his overall stats are not great. His sanity is really low and he has resentment for the team housing Eggman. But after reading a little bit more, I understand why Jet is angry. The first thing is that Wave has disappeared, and if that wasn't bad enough, she had just proposed to him right before she vanished, basically telling him that they have to act on their love now because there may never be another chance to do so. And this is why on her stat sheet, we can see her wearing this ring on her wing. And lastly, we get to see Storm, who was infected shortly after Wave disappeared, sacrificing himself so that Jet could escape the infection. And while this guy isn't necessarily very fast or strong, he has this high-pitched screech that is probably going to become an issue if left unchecked. Now, back over in the comic, we see that Knuckles and Whisper are back out in the field with SBO following them in stealth. The first thing that they see is Vanilla, but Knuckles doesn't seem to be worried about her because he knows that she doesn't actually attack anyone. Whisper, though, isn't hearing any of that, and the first thing that she does is prepare to take a shot at her. Knuckles has to physically grab the barrel of her sniper to get her to listen, saying that Vanilla is not a threat and that they need to focus on their real target. And even though SBO hears all this, he doesn't actually know what's about to happen next. But we know that he's about to witness one of his best friends face down a flamethrower. This is where the AU ends at the moment, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here. I'm especially interested in seeing what is going to happen with Shadow and if Tails and Eggman will be able to come up with a cure. I'm predicting that before that can happen, the hero team is probably going to have to deal with people starting to turn their backs on them or betraying them due to the fact that they are keeping Eggman around. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to go check out Feeling over on her Instagram, and also make sure to subscribe to the Porcelain Dog Production YouTube channel so you can see when these voice acted comics drop. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time with another one. Peace, peace.